obligatory screen sharing process. Let's see if this works. Do you see my screen now? Good. So as Erik said, this is a report, or I have chaired a report for the SNS Economic Policy Council 2021, named Digitalization and Competition. So in addition to me, the authors were Richard Friberg, who is the professor at Stockholm School of Economics, Björn Lundqvist, who's an associate professor of law at Stockholm University, and Robin Tegland, who is a professor at the Technical University, Chalmers Technical University in Gothenburg. So I think I'd start this with making some observations about digitalization and competition in general. Well, first off, in 2020, 7 of the top 10 firms in terms of market cap had digitalization at the core of their business. And in 2010, it was just Microsoft and Apple. And most of these firms are digital platforms in one way or another. So what about competition then? Well, economic research suggests that there is a degree of less than competition in general across the economies as measured by excess profit. But these excess profits are very skewed. So there are some firms that are taking big windfalls and others where it hasn't happened that much. Also, another trend is that capital share of value added has increased while labor's has fallen, which contributes to economic inequality, which is a hot political issue on itself. Another observation is that many of the tech giants are now involved in antitrust proceedings on both sides of the Atlantic. So the fines in the three Google cases in EU totals around 10 billion euros. On the other side of the Atlantic, Federal Trade Commission has launched a case against Facebook where they look to accomplish a divestiture of Instagram and WhatsApp. And Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook are all subject to antitrust action. And the authorities have also sharpened their tone, and we see new rules on its way. So EU proposes a platform regulation, the Digital Markets Act, and we also have the Digital Service Act on its way. In the US, we have seen Congress hearings with the leaders of the big tech companies, and there are a number of court cases. In Australia, we recently saw the government insist on that Google and Facebook pay for news content. So things are happening now. But of course, digitization is just not just platforms. We also see that competition increases in many ways. So digitalization reduces frictions across economies, which leads to sharpened competition, but also new opportunities. So in markets like that, small advantages are leveraged and have big effects. So let me linger on a little bit on the last point. So it sharpens competition, creates new opportunities. So while small and medium-sized firms can sell globally, they also face global competition at home. With competition just one click away, it means that small quality difference go a long way because it's so easy for the consumers to choose the best product. And that in turn creates incentives to invest heavily in R&D or marketing or to profile brand names. And these incentives increase in the market size. And when markets are global, you would expect larger investment. So that can lead to consolidation and concentration, as you see in mobile telephony. In such an environment, you have to be sufficiently good to survive. So, and that means that local conditions become more important. And Sweden has recently been quite successful in digital markets with several unicorns. But there is also a challenge to try to keep an edge in a small economy like Sweden or Finland, where the local resources and business climate becomes more important so that businesses don't move away or competed away by foreign firms. So the report concerns um, digital markets, and this drama about competitive facts in digital markets, it's taking place now. So the rules and the politics that is shaped now will have importance in the future. And perhaps even more so because the digitalization process is ongoing and will be more profound through the Internet of Things, for instance. And there has been several reports on this internationally, but at least in Sweden, it has received moderate exposure in Sweden. You have the FIRMA report, you have the EU Commission's report, etc. So what we do in this report is we try to highlight central economic mechanism of digitization and how they affect competition. We report on current court cases and impending changes of the rules of the game. And we also look on digitalization and competition or competitiveness from a Swedish perspective. So we try to give an overview, contribute with insights and policy implication. So that's our aim. So I'll just say a few words about the basic mechanisms, which most of you probably are quite familiar with. So if we look at the central aspects of digitalization, we can look at them, divide them up if we want to, in what's happening on the cost side and what's happening on the demand side. So on the cost side of firms, we have economies of scale, where you have large markets, you can invest a lot, and you can use those investments for a large market, which is the traditional setup for economies of scale. You also have falling costs for gathering and analyzing data and communicating in networks. So these are benefits on the cost side that will tend to make it advantageous to be a big firm. On the demand side, you have economies of scope, which basically means that you have a lower cost in doing multiple things. So Google can have, they have these search services. They can also have their map services and a host of other things that come together. And it's advantageous to expand the scope of your operation. There's also more competition across national borders because you reach further with the internet. And then you have network effects. And again, I guess most of you are very familiar with network effects, but for those who aren't, the basic idea is that it's kind of a scale economy on the demand side. So the more subscribers or consumers you have, the greater the value of your product. And the simplest example would be a social network. So if you're alone in a social network, well, it's not much of a social network and the value is low. But when you have a lot of subscribers, the value increases. The same would go for dating service or whatever, transactional platform like stock market and so on. So these are important and they all work to benefit large firms. And so if we look at platforms, it will look like this. So you have a lot of sellers and they meet on the platform with buyers. And here you can see that scale effect are important. You can also think of it as a dating service or whatever. So you have matching going on. So scale is important here. So now, it also brings a lot of benefit while we are worried about harm to competition because these firms become so big, many of the platform firms, they're almost natural monopolies. You can't help but worry about competition. So these firms are a gatekeeper for other firms that want to operate on these platforms so they can stifle entry. But one concern that has surfaced quite a lot recently is the issue of self-preferencing at the expense of business users. So that harms competition on the platform. You can talk about competition for the market or on the market. So basically, the idea is competition for the market would be to try to challenge Google with a new search engine, which is hard. Competition on the market is to use the platform for conducting your own business. So there are some examples of unicorns trying to corner niche markets. So I guess Spotify is doing that in music somehow. But for most firms, it's competition on the platforms that is interesting. So firms venture on Amazon and try to sell the theirs, and there it's you would be concerned about the playing field not being level. So and self-preferencing and these things. Um, so, and also in terms of another antitrust worry is the acquisitions of competitors. So the big firms try to stay competitive. As I mentioned initially, Facebook acquired WhatsApp and so on. So many of these acquisitions, these platforms acquire a lot of firms, but many of these firms are small and fly under the radar, so to speak, because the acquisitions are below the threshold. And they're also a complex market, and they're hard to judge the effects, the competitive effects of acquisitions such as this. They require more competence and resources for antitrust authorities. So I'll say a few words about regulation and antitrust, because level playing fields are important and a lot of action is taking right now. So one proposal is the Digital Market Act. So, and that's proposed by the EU Commission. It's targeting the dominant platforms, and here the threshold is set very high. So basically, they're targeting big US firms. And the idea is to try to prevent self-preferencing, and it includes far-reaching obligations to share data. And it also gives the Commission the capacity to impose high fines or other sanction. Ultimately, they can also impose structural sanction, that is, break up firms if nothing else helps. So you need to. So it's potential for the good, but you also sort of have to. It's a balance act. So you don't want to punish firms for being successful. So there is a business risk in trying to become one of these big firms, and that you don't want to punish in itself. So in the report, we discuss a number of suggestions what you can do, and especially Björn Lundqvist pushed for data issues to introduce a right to use data for those who generate data on platforms, and maybe to even let that right take precedence over other data regulation as GDPR or IP rights under certain conditions, and also promote exchange of data and data interoperability, and accept data pools, which is a collaboration between firms, so potentially anti-competitive, but here it would serve a purpose and be pro-competitive. So a few words about digitalization and competition in Sweden, and I mentioned Finland also. So in some aspects, Sweden is highly ranked, number 2 in digital economy and society in this 2019 after Finland. And there are a number of rankings where Sweden and Finland also places well. So in terms of digital infrastructure, Finland and Sweden are doing quite well. But that's, at least in Sweden, that's not valid across the board. So the big firms are aware of this. It's not the same for small and medium-sized enterprises, and especially not for business-to-business firms. So you could wish for more urgency there to have digital preparedness. It's also very uneven geographically. So you see here in red that Digital maturity is concentrated in Stockholm, and the bluer it gets, the colder it is, and the less developed it is. So what about the future? As I said initially, we have some concentration or a lot of concentration platforms now, but this could be even more so in the future as we will move towards the Internet of Things, which will be dependent on platform, and we will maybe create new tech giants in the future. And that could make the current competition problems even more profound. So I'll bring this up to some of our conclusions in the report. So digitalization brings opportunities, but market access often goes via the platform, and the competitive conditions there are crucial, not the least for Swedish and Finnish firms. And this will become even more important in the future. So what Sweden and Finland could do is to support pro-competitive initiative at the EU level. So that would include, for instance, the platform regulation, another pro-competitive initiative. And data is a crucial issue here. So we would also like to suggest that we promote initiatives that support the right of data and data pools. Also, we would probably need to strengthen our antitrust authorities, especially when it comes to the oversight of mergers, which is tricky because you have a very tight time limit there, and these are complex assessment. Also, finally, since digitalization sharpens global competition, make local conditions even more important, that's a field where politics need to focus. So how can it be attractive to do digital business in countries like Sweden and Finland? So what edges do small countries like Sweden and Finland have? Well, digital markets partly offset one disadvantage of small countries, that you have a too small home market. Now the digital market is global. It can't equally well offset the disadvantage of relative small competence pools in small countries. So that we would have to try to affect by political means. So good education system, well, Finland is known for that, less so in Sweden perhaps, but this becomes increasingly important. But we also have pragmatic, well-functioning market economies with a lot of trust and relatively little corruption, which is good for entrepreneurship. And so far, both Sweden and Finland has been quite far ahead when it comes to digital maturity and infrastructure, but we have to keep going. So if you want to be, as I said earlier, when competition is just one click away, you need to stay ahead technologically or with your offering to consumers. And one way to do that is to be one step ahead when it comes to digital maturity. So you develop the services of the future, and that requires us to be on our toes, to be one step ahead, also when it comes to infrastructure and digital maturity. So I think I'll conclude there.
Thank you. That was truly thought-provoking. I'll be quick here and hand over right away to Edward for his comments, driving business, a very digital one and globally. So looking forward. Please, Edward.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you. You got my presentation up. I'll try to be brief. I guess we're lagging behind the schedule slightly. Jumping right in, thank you very much for the presentation. It's experiencing and perceiving, and I do find it to be relevant both on an EU level that we wake up to these, let's say, market changes, and also on our smaller economy levels, that we understand both the strengths and the weaknesses or risks that are inherent here, and react to them in advance. And so if you could change the slide, please, Erik. As we see it now, the platforms really do give an opportunity for reshaping industry quite a lot. And we already see that, like in the previous presentation, the market capitalization of companies have changed, and that, or the top 10, let's say, in the world, and that resonates with the change in market logic, change in market, let's say, sales channels, and where the larger profits are made at the moment. And this reflects one of my takes from the report and the presentation, that information has become truly global, and we can see that companies, both in the B2B sector and also consumers, compare and very, let's say, efficiently market information, pricing information, product information on a global market. And so when we in Finland used to easily walk or tour of the city to go to the store to get, you know, the newest clothes or so on, now you very easily browse the internet for products globally. And actually, because Finland is lagging quite badly behind in internet markets, it leads to the Finnish, let's say, retail industry losing out in its market, relative market share of its own consumers. And so I think that the same reflects and it can be seen in all other aspects of market as well. Tesla is trying to transform the sales of cars by taking over the distribution and sales channels itself. Wholesalers in traditional markets where we in my CombiWorks company are active, infrastructure products and the wholesale of products on that market currently is undergoing quite substantial changes, and it will go through far more changes in the world, where you had quite stable markets with let's say producers or importers, and then wholesalers, and then the retail, and it was quite stably distributed among these players. And now this whole logic is being turned upside down, where each of these players, even the larger one, need to reinvent themselves and ensure that they are actually creating some sort of value in the market. And so that means that yes, on the one hand side, we have a situation where global dominant players are, or let's say that the previous old traditional global dominant players in retail are being put under pressure, and at the same time giving a lot of new competition on the market. But we also see that the platforms and the marketplaces that have gone truly global are already there, and they're very dominant, and they are quite American and China-led, which means that because the information is global, it also means, if we can, yes, thank you, this second slide, it means that the competition is not necessarily getting more even though it has provided a means to transform the markets. At the same time, we see that companies that have lagged behind in digital investments have also been put under a lot of pressure. That if looking back 15 years, which is relatively, even on a human scale, is relatively short as a time period, we can see that where 15 years ago digital marketplaces were more of a curiosity and nice to have, because people were still doing basically consumption through visiting stores and the human-to-human interactions 15 years ago. It then, in the past 5 or at least 10, depending on the market or the business sector, it has become a strength for companies that if you are digital, you have, let's say, a strength and differentiator over your competition. But this already, I think, has changed, and formerly dominant market players that forgot to go digital in time now see it not anymore as a strength if they go digital, but it's actually something of let's say, competition hinder and problem, that they are lagging behind, they are not able to compete. And it's not so that, let's say, Stockholm, who has been very much in the media in Finland, just the fact that they maybe were a bit late to the race means that you cannot just transform your previous consumer base into a new digital consumer base, because you need to fight for your market position from scratch, as it were. And it also means that the requirements from the companies have changed radically, where you were previously okay to make an, let's say, travel to the store, browse longer, see a limited selection, and that was okay on the previous market. But nowadays, that really no longer is the case. You expect to see a huge variety of let's say, purchasing options, whether it is in the B2C or in the B2B, and that reflects into an immediate customer expectation on information, on data, and fast transactions. And now when these global marketplaces are also investing heavily in immediate gratification, let's say, meaning large warehouses where they automate the shipments and you can have the next day deliveries of your purchases. And that means that if you compare driving to the city, going to a store, finding a parking space for your car, or taking the public transport and so on, it is not really a big difference anymore in terms of the waiting time to get your item if you purchase it from the large automated marketplaces. So the digitalization has really become a requirement, and it's starting to shift the market status and the sales channels. So if you could change the slide, please. But on the other hand, it also provides an opportunity. Marketplaces, in a way, is also a way to tap into existing resources. So whereas the let's say, retail and even B2B sales markets are starting to consolidate onto certain marketplace platforms, you also see, on the other hand, this transformation where you get physical resources into far greater use. And so I kind of want to question businesses to ask themselves that what is actually stopping your company from going into this digital transformation. As an example, you can look at Airbnb, where they obviously sell, let's say, apartments on a short-term lease basis, or you could say that it is a hotel business. But what it actually does is bring a lot of actual physical resources that were purchased before into a digital domain, where the access to data is immediate and easy, and the comparison of different resources is easy. The market, or expands the availability of such resources onto the market. So what it actually means is that the same, probably I would say, is going to happen in also the taxi field, where there's been longstanding or digitally long-standing, but human history-wise short-standing debate over Uber, for example, and how they have come to what we thought transformed the taxi market, but then actually realizing that they did not transform taxi market, they just became a new taxi provider. But let's say that the next step would be that any one of us sitting in our car would put on an Uber app and provide our resource to be used for driving others while we are anyways headed to one direction. That way we would get physical resources into better use. And this is one next transformative change in the B2B market as well, where we get more manufacturing resources better into use. We get all kinds of physical resources, be it forklifts or even human welding labor or whatever, into better use because they are available and the data can be used to compare, make sound judgment calls and decisions, and therefore procure. So the platforms really, the strengths of the platform lies in the use of data, the sharing of data, and basically creating common purchasing rules. And here you come to where the big players are very good in analyzing human purchasing behavior and therefore reducing the steps and the barriers for purchasing it. And this is hard to compete with even for the traditional strong players in, let's say, Stockholm in Finland and wholesalers and so on. So this really creates new and enhanced competition. And my final kind of takeaway from here is that what I see to be important is that legislation should push towards integrations, towards integratability. So yes, probably you should also look into restricting these players, but what you should also compare and think about is integratability. So if you take Amazon's and Tencent's and Facebook's and Google's applications and create a way in which these marketplaces are integrating with each other so that not one dominant player would own the whole marketplace, that would create a push towards greater competition and open, at least limit the monopoly opportunities for these big marketplaces, and therefore hopefully then push the competition or push competition towards more equal terms and not limit the marketplaces to only the large ones. That is my takeaway from the report, and actually very extensive and good report, I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward, for a really inspiring and positive view on digitalization and its opportunities. I will hand over to Tua, again, running a bit late, so please, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Can I have my slides also?
Yes, they're clicking here frantically.
All right, thank you. All right, so maybe I thought I would just briefly tell you a little bit of my background because and where my kind of remarks are coming from. So I work and has been working for VTT, which is a technical research center of Finland, for almost 20 years and last 30 years in ICT and electronics and microelectronics sector. So I've seen the developments of digital technologies and being at the in a way at the front line of when they are being developed and even more importantly taken into use by the companies and organizations and nations. So maybe you can take a next slide, please. So as we have heard today, of course, digitalization as such have a very significant effect on competition and market structures and such. But where I would like to maybe put a bit more emphasis is like and start also actually where Edward was talking about is that where the value is created. And here we can also think about these new business models and and platforms like mentioned before, but also a kind of a combinations of the not only different technologies but different viewpoints like circular economy or sustainability, where we should think about the whole, in a way, the whole value chains. And where it comes to technologies overall, what are those that we are being considered as important for building competitive advantage by the companies or nations? And here I would like to take as an example quantum technology, which has been boosted over the past couple of years. And Finnish government made a decision last year that we are going to invest in building the first Finnish quantum computer here in Finland, and we invested that 20 million euros plus something. And we all know that there are nations and companies around the world which are able to invest a lot more. But the point here is not kind of at this kind of a computing capability or capacity we are building, and not only that, but that how we actually can start here in Sweden and Finland to start about the applications and the combination where we can use the technology. And if we take a look, for example, to patent databases and using the words quantum technology plus something, so there comes actually a huge amount of different kind of application areas where people all over the world are now thinking that this quantum technology and this huge capacity of capacity is going to be used, for example, of course, medicine, biotech, and so forth. So this is one of the key starting point, I think, when we think about the competition and how these small countries and nations or companies here can be successful in the future. That we think about these potential application from different perspectives and think how we can actually use the technology. And then if we think about the overall this digital sovereignty and digital maturity, also what Sten was mentioned earlier, that how we can support overall different companies or SMEs kind of to raise this maturity level, and how we can think about this in a way that what data we already have and what we should have for the future for building these new type of business models or ideas or applications and so forth. But all in a way starts that we understand the value of the data and the value of what we have now and value of what we should be having in the future, and think about that potential. And then maybe I would like to combine here this digitalization and combination. I would like to kind of combine the sustainability aspect here. And I even claim that if we think about the future, that then every successful company should be and will be sustainable. And here I can refer, for example, this EU's a published industry strategy. I think it was published last year March, where we at the European level we combine two very critical and important aspects of digitalization and kind of going towards this climate neutrality and sustainability. And this is one of the core thing I think every companies now should be thinking about through different business models and how they can build and process and produce whatever they are doing, products and services, more sustainable way. And this is one of the key, I believe, one of the key success factors for nations like Finland and Sweden for the future. And now if you can switch the slide, please. So there were many very important recommendations in the paper. I would like to maybe add or complement those recommendations of these four bullet points, which I just, because we have kind of time restriction, go through pretty quickly. So one of the key things I think we should do, and we are doing here, is that we should allocate resources and support for the companies kind of raising this digitalization maturity level. Now, especially SMEs, like we actually saw in Sten's presentation, that there are different levels and different areas even which are more mature than others. And then, of course, the that we all understand and companies understand the value of the data, because then we can build new business kind of on top of that. And then well, I come from research organization, but I see that nations like us, we only have our kind of innovation capacity that we can use to compete in global markets. So we should invest now and in the future research, science, innovation, and even more the collaboration between different companies, research organizations, and universities to build this competitive advantage and the kind of combine different kind of competencies, and of course the collaboration between Nordic countries I see especially important. Then I think that even though many things go fast around the world, we still should ensure that we have technical capabilities and understanding in key base areas in digital technologies as such. And here, of course, the AI, big data, IoT technologies in general, now edge computing, quantum, and so forth. So just last week, I think there was this European Cloud and Edge kind of initiative was published, and several big companies were joining. So those are, of course, the activities that we also need to support. And then final point here, I think it's important to kind of raise understanding of these sustainability requirements and start building those capabilities in every company. So new competitive advantage demands, I think, this sustainability. So thank you. That was really brief.
Thank you, Tua. That was really quick and really interesting. And now we have Christina online. A short intro on her. She's the head of data and analytics at Kemira, and prior to this, she led the data leadership practice at Sofigate. Also, she has been working on digital transformation program and structure of a data and analytics competence center at Fortum. So a really long history within data. But what always interests me is, and you probably get this a lot, is also served as a director for nuclear research. That's always thrilling. And she actually holds a PhD in nuclear engineering from Lappeenranta University. But a warm welcome to Christina, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I can share my screen also from this side. I was a little bit late to send my presentation.
That works.
That's fine. I will share it from here. So, hi everybody. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what we are doing with Kemira, and also a few views from my earlier experience from Fortum. So, as we know, what we want to do with data analytics is to create value. And that's kind of the whole point why big companies are here. And we don't really care what technologies we use, what platforms we use. We just want to have the best possible tools and technologies. We want to put them together in the best possible way and be able to create value. And that's all about kind of our strategy. And we have also taken this sustainability as our cornerstone in Kemira. And that's why I wanted to start with this this business strategy that Kemira has at the moment. And because we need to build this data analytics capabilities now together with the business strategies, we have selected few topics where we can actually help Kemira to reach their business goals with data analytics. And that's why we have selected a few cases here, and we have built this kind of vision of data-driven company. And as I said, what we want to do is to create value. And that value is created mainly through different projects, utilizing different technologies like AI, make better decisions, predict something, and things like that. That's kind of the top of our decision making or elements of data-driven company. But on the bottom, we also want to make sure that we have the governance structure in order, we have best technologies and tools in order, and we also have the data asset management there. And this is kind of the big picture. And it's collaboration between the three parts of the company. It's always business driven. It has to have IT support from the tools and technologies, and also data experts bringing the capabilities and knowledge around different analytics or other topics there. This is kind of our vision. And how do we get there is, of course, utilizing, as I said, best possible tools and also the best possible ecosystems. And I think that was one of the cornerstones also in this report, is the ecosystem that is available. And I also wanted to share kind of the platform use and our competitive edge. How do we see it? So we see that our competitive edge, at least in Finland, but also internationally, is not to create something new for IT system platforms. It's how to create the best possible ecosystem and best possible kind of environment around the topics that we are solving. And those parts we are really good at in Finland and Sweden and also other European countries. We know our customers, we understand very well the IoT platforms and needs there, and we do have the ecosystem part available. And we use both big, wide international companies and platforms like Microsoft or Amazon or Google or so on. But we also use these small companies that have created certain solutions and services on top of different platforms. Also really important for us. But as I said, we are not creating new systems or new platforms, but we are just configuring them in the best possible way so that we can create value for the company that we are looking. That's basically the story I wanted to share from the business and big corporate perspective.
Thank you so much, Kristiina. Happily, we have about 10 minutes to continue on with discussions. I was thinking of kicking off. If you all had the chance to change one thing and help us, what would be the most low-hanging fruit? What would be the easiest thing to change that would have a great impact on helping us with competition and thinking about digitalization both in Finland and Sweden? Should I give over to start here with Sten? He has the longest time to think about it here when listening to all our great comments.
Well, I don't know about low-hanging fruit. Of course, in the short run, we could support what we think is good regulation and so on. But maybe more importantly, over the long run, we need to make sure that our countries stay competitive in terms of human capital and business conditions. But that's over a longer horizon.
Please feel free to jump in if you have one. Otherwise, I'll give it to Tua.
Yeah, I was just going to continue about this talent. So if I would like to change or boost something, I would also like to boost this education, research, and science and innovations in general. That how this works. So this is always kind of one of the key things I think the small nations, like I said earlier, anyway, should be doing.
Yeah, I can jump in and add on top of that the competencies and the knowledge. I think is really in the core as mentioned, and not only the kind of the knowledge of the new tools or technologies, but combination of knowledge of the kind of old-fashioned IT tools and together with the new tools and systems and technologies, because we cannot get rid of also this legacy, but we need to understand how to combine the new with
Edward, were you trying to say something? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you, yes.
I have been thinking quite a lot about this, that the marketplaces are really taking shape, and the difficulty in building a new marketplace from scratch is quite substantial. So I have seen a lot of discussion about data sharing. I have seen a discussion about restricting and limiting these marketplaces, but I haven't actually seen a lot of discussion about whether there might be an opportunity to force them to provide integrations, so that by joining one marketplace and selling your products there, it would simultaneously also enter the other marketplaces. And this way, without the negative restrictions, do it through the positive to limit the power of any one marketplace. So I can't say that I have a solution to that, but I kind of feel that by creating the ability to be present in all of them at the same time, then, and without substantial investments, that could maybe help in limiting the power of any individual marketplace.
Do we need to reinvent free trade in a digital era in some way? I'm no expert. I'm just
in a way that's what we need to rethink and reinvent it. It's not necessarily that nobody has thought about it, but there's just so many things that need to be rebuilt and redone now. So hopefully all of them will come, but we are already now at the place where certain marketplaces are so dominant that it's very hard for anyone else to actually compete. And in a way, Amazon is helping or forcing others to join its marketplace by providing its services to other aspiring marketplaces as well. So there are certain elements there, and maybe these functions can be harnessed so that we expand on that logic even further.
Thank you. A question from the audience was, what's the difference between Finland and Sweden when thinking about digitalization? I just read yesterday on AI, which probably is one very important part of digitalization, that in EU in general, SMEs, 7% of them are utilizing AI in any significant part of their business. Finland was top 3 with 23%. With 12%. Ireland was number 1 with 23%. There could be Facebook and Google and things like that in the surroundings that help up. Sweden was in the top 10 with 9%. So there is some kind of a difference, but my reflection was that this percentage seems very, very low. Is there a difference between Finland and Sweden? Is there something we could do together to enhance this, where both Finland and Sweden would be strong in cooperation? Silence is golden.
Maybe if I can say just briefly, I don't know that much of differences between Finland and Sweden, but all in all, I can say that things are progressing, I suppose, in both countries. In Finland, we have invested quite a lot of AI research and especially education in universities. And of course, when we are thinking about, again, that where the talents and experts to the companies are coming, so of course the universities are good kind of a talent base for the companies as well. And then we have been really active in when we established this Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence a couple of years back, that one of the key cornerstone there is that it's not only about the research and science, but also about the impact, that how AI capabilities are kind of integrated to the companies, and kind of how we can support industries to take these AI kind of capabilities to use. So maybe there is something behind that. I don't know.
Yeah, I can make a brief comment from a Swedish perspective. I'm by no means any AI expert, but from what I've heard, Sweden is lagging behind a little bit. And I guess so is Europe. That in AI, it's China and the US taking the lead. Not for lack of investment, apparently. So Europe has invested a lot. It's just that they haven't got the same effect on their investments, and I'm not really sure why. I had also a comment on Edward's comment about what I guess sometimes called multi-homing. So if you can access several platforms, that's good because that leads more competition and between platforms. I guess the trouble is that consumers for low value items aren't really prepared to go through the hassle. I mean, they're perfectly happy with searching with Google, and they're happy with Facebook and so on. But I guess for high value items, you might consider looking at other platforms and so on. So it's problematic, but it would be really good if we could, as Edward suggested, find ways to move in directions so we have more multi-homing. And Edward also pointed to that digitalization breaks up value chains, that we have to figure out where to do economic activities most efficiently, if I interpret you correctly. And I guess one problem that happens now with platforms is that the value added of a product of a service can move, the share that's captured by different parts of the value chain varies. So if platforms become more important, and these platforms do different things, but if you look at Facebook and Google, what they have is they control the access to consumer attention. And it's hard to get around, even if you advertise locally. So we're trying to market a new education or program at the department, and it's a small scale. We're targeting a local audience, and still we do it on Facebook and Instagram to reach local youth in Stockholm. So they have access to the consumers, and they can capture value in that part of the value chain.
Thank you, Sten. And now I see that we're 1 minute over already, so I just need to thank you all. Let's have another chat somewhere down the road where we can discuss this further. A big thank you to all of you, and thank you to the audience who sent in questions very, very rapidly and a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.